So, again, hello everyone. Welcome to the fifth session of our Scholars Program, one of our programs for our summer programs. Today, we're joining here on this session on ending gender-based violence, domestic and sexual violence session, where our focus is to investigate the prevalence of gender-based violence with a focus on domestic and sexual violence and exploring the legal frameworks in place to combat these abuses. We are honored to have here Diane Rosenfeld, the founding director of the Gender Violence Program and a lecturer in law at Harvard Law School. She's the founding director of the Gender Violence Program, and her course includes at Harvard Law includes gender violence, law, and social justice, sports, sex, and equality on campus, and the reading groups on feminist utopias and the Bonobo Sisterhood. She's the author of the recent book, The Bonobo Sisterhood: Revolution Through Female Alliance, published by HarperCollins. Mrs. Rosenfeld's actively engaged in promoting its thesis that creating unprecedented female-female alliances modeled on the bonobos is a promising path towards thwarting patriarchal violence. Her vision is that every woman should take a self-worth defending class to connect to her personal power, uniting the creation of the Bonobo Sisterhood. Prior to teaching at Harvard, she served as the first senior counsel to the Office of Violence Against Women at the U.S. Department of Justice. She was recently appointed to the Committee of Scholars for MS Magazine. We are honored and thank you very much for being here. The floor is yours, and we're all ears to all the information and the expertise you're handing to us. Thank you very much for being here. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
That wasn't on my side. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Ivanka. I am really honored to be here and to talk to all of you fabulous young people this morning, afternoon, evening. You can advance the slide. You can advance it again since I've been introduced. So I know that we're gathered here from all over the place. So that's why I said good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And it's morning here where I am, and I'm facing the sun, so I might get some funky angles, but that's okay because it's worth facing the sun. So this is going to be a very different talk from what you probably are expecting. I'm not going to talk about law and changing laws all that much, even though I'm a law professor. And you will understand the reasons for that when this is over. But I want everyone to take a deep breath, first of all. Think about where we are in the world and open your mind, because what women have been doing to try to accomplish and gain human rights in this world is not working. So what I want to do is offer you a whole new perspective on how to change women's rights. And what do we talk about when we talk about human rights is the following. We talk about what rights men give women in a patriarchy. That's what we talk about. And when we talk about women's human rights, we talk about what rights men in a patriarchy give women. And my question is, who are men to decide what rights women have as humans? What gave them the right to decide who gets rights? Is that a legitimate premise for governing and for running a society? And of course, the answer is no, it's not. But what can we do to change it? We actually can change it. So pay attention this morning, afternoon, or evening. Okay, you can change it. This is from the Barbie movie, and just a cute quote from Ken. Why didn't Barbie tell me about patriarchy? Which, to my understanding, is where men and horses run everything. It's kind of sarcastic. The Barbie movie was amusing in how it dealt with patriarchy, and I think actually named patriarchy and brought it up, which I appreciate. What I'm going to offer you today is hope. Most of you probably don't know what bonobos are, but by the time this talk is over, you will know what they are, and you too will share the hope that bonobos give us. I have a non-for-profit that we're just starting to spring off the ground called the Bonobo Sisterhood Alliance. And in the next 2 weeks, the website will be up and lots of resources and things that you can do and things that you can access that will help you learn more about how to create your own Bonobo Sisterhood. Okay, so what do bonobos tell us about sexual violence? So these are bonobos. They're adorable. Are they not adorable? Um, Bonobos are a separate species from chimpanzees, but for a long time, people thought they were just smaller chimpanzees, but they're actually a separate species with a completely different social order. Okay, introducing you to bonobos. Like chimpanzees, bonobos share 98.7% of their DNA with humans. So they are our last common ancestor, just like chimpanzees are. Their social organization is different because it is formed through female-female alliances. And this is how it works. If a female bonobo was aggressed upon by a male, she would let out a special cry. That's really quite what it sounds like. And all the other females within earshot, whether they know her, like her, or are related to her, come immediately to her aid. They form an instant coalition and they fend off the male. They send him into isolation and he comes back a few days later, or a few weeks, or a few hours, depending on how bad the crime was, or the offense was. And they all have sex and they make up and they share food and everything's fine. Evolutionarily, bonobos have eliminated male sexual coercion. So I could really just stop right there. But what could we learn about bonobos? Next. Bonobos are living proof that patriarchy is not inevitable. Bonobos live in a peaceful society where there has been no lethal violence ever observed among bonobos. So let that settle into your mind for a minute. In the whole primate world, lethal violence is quite common, most commonly in the form of infanticide. Primates, all kinds of primates, the males use sexual coercion to control female reproduction. Does that sound familiar at all? Any of you in the United States right now, where the patriarchy just decided that women can't control their own reproduction anymore, or that they can do so only at a huge cost? Um, so these are really big questions underlying this frame of bonobos. Um, Next slide, please. I'm gonna wait, I'm gonna explain thank you, the um, the outline of the book. And while I do, I want to encourage you to be optimistic and open-minded about what bonobos show us, because the key to it is that if we hear a cry as humans, as human females, by another female, that we come to her aid immediately, instead of saying to ourselves, oh, I don't know her. Maybe she's not really in trouble. I don't really like her. She's not part of my friend group. I'm not related to her. This isn't my problem. This is your problem. If any woman is in trouble, if any girl is in trouble, you are in trouble too. And if a girl is safe, you are safe too. And we all need to and want to and deserve to live in safety, because you have to have safety in order to have freedom. Okay, so this is an introduction to the frame of the book. So now you can press one. This is largely a question of who will come to your aid. So if something terrible happens to you, the first thing you think is, oh, law. I'm going to file a lawsuit, or I'll go to the police and they'll file a criminal case. You think that law will come to your aid. But law will not come to your aid because patriarchy. Law was written by men, between men, for men, identifying and solidifying their interests, writing that all into law. And women were not at the table. As men wrote laws between themselves, those laws included their rights among themselves to rule over women. And that's what patriarchy means. Patriarchy means male supremacy. It means that the patriarch is the one who's in charge, who makes all the decision, who has all of the power, and that it's at his discretion, however he decides he wants to treat the people he's in charge of. So patriarchy and law, which is a product of patriarchy, is the product of male-male alliances. And these male-male alliances separate and rule over women. So just think about law structurally and also ask yourself the question, which I asked myself for many years, why is it so hard to effectively change the law? And for years before I learned about bonobos, I I did legal policy advising at very high levels of government, both in state government in Illinois and in the federal government at the U.S. Department of Justice. And I can tell you that law isn't the way to go. Law has a particular intransigence at helping women. And why is that? So next slide. So then you think if the law won't come to my aid, other men will come to my aid. But here's the problem with that. And sometimes, that works. Sometimes a man will come to your aid, certainly. But here's the problem with that. If men are the ones who come to protect us, then they also get to decide who among us is worthy of protection. And then they divide women in terms of how worthy of protection they are. And if they're unprotected, that means that they're vulnerable to anyone, which means you get trafficked or prostituted. And men simply should not have that power as humans. So then we think, next, that women will come to our aid. But the problem in patriarchy, and this is really important, is that when women are divided against themselves for male protection, they don't unite to protect one another. Because we think in a patriarchy that men are our saviors, that they're the only ones who can protect us. And we don't look to other women to protect us because women, we don't have a model for it. But actually, bonobos, our closest evolutionary cousin, are a model for how other females can successfully protect us. But in this top part of the slide, which represents patriarchy, women are divided against each other and they will not unite to protect us. Instead, they will victim blame. They will say, well, if I was just a good girl, if I just obey this rule or dress this way or don't go out at night, etc., 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 all the other unfreedoms that women endure and suffer, then we won't be assaulted. But we know that's not true. There's nothing we can do to really protect ourselves except to really protect ourselves. So it comes down to yourself. So self-defense is the pivot of this book. So I do hope that you all read the book. I would love for you to read the book. For those of you who might have Spotify Premium, it's free and it's available, it's available online. And if any of you has a hard time getting it, you can contact me and I would be happy to help you get a copy because I know that people are from all over the world, but it's a good book. It's kind of like a friend that will, I can't make it show somehow. But it can serve as a friend when you need it after you read it. But the first half of the book is about the problem. So the problem of law, um, and why law doesn't work for women. And then chapter 6 is called A Self-Worth Defending. And that's the pivot of the book because self-defense is the key to learning that you have a self-worth defending. And then once you learn from the outside in and the inside out that you have a self-worth defending, it changes everything. It's a transformational moment, and it means that you can learn to defend your sisters. Um, there's one quick point I want to make about law before we move on in this. This is your legal history lesson for today that proves my point. In Blackstone's commentaries from the 18th century, he wrote that, and Blackstone was credited with these treatises that encoded the laws at the time. All right, ready? Legally, if a man killed his wife, it was exactly the same as if he had killed a stranger, and the consequences for that would be the same. If a woman killed her husband, it was an act of treason for which she would be put to death. Treason. So this is really all you need to know about law. Treason? Like, how in the world did it get to be treason? And treason is what? Treason is rising up against your government. Treason is turning your back on your king. So when Sarah Bareilles, the great musician, writes in her song, who made you king of anything? Men did. Men wrote themselves into the law as kings of their own castles. And that's why police don't bother to intervene in another man's violence at home, in his home, because there's this agreement in patriarchy that men will not interfere in another man's patriarchal rule of his family. And if you look at that difference, the idea of designating treason as the crime and punishment that a woman would suffer if she killed her husband. And let's face it, women only kill their husbands in self-defense. Women are not murderous like anywhere near to the degree that men are. I mean, statistically, 85% of crime and murder are committed by men. So that's an important example to keep in mind. Okay, back to self-defense. When I said that from the outside in, you learn that you have self-worth defending, what I mean is even very quiet women and girls who get into a self-defense class learn, first of all, to say no, to say it loudly, to use different physical self-defenses, but more importantly, they learn to set boundaries and to assert themselves and to say, I have space, I have a right to walk down the street without being harassed, that kind of thing. You learn that from the outside in, that you can do it. And then once you learn that, you learn from the inside out that you have a self-worth defending. Next. So there's your self-worth defending. And like I said, it's the pivot of the book and it really changes everything. So the book goes on from there to rebuild. Next. The thing is that once you realize your ability to defend yourself and you overcome the fear that patriarchy instills in each of us, and we like look behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz and say, that's just one person. It's just one scared little wizard. It's not really legitimate. It's another person, and we need a whole different way of living in the world because patriarchy is not good for women and other living human beings. Once we discover in our bodies, in a somatic sense, that we can self-defend, it makes us much more able to imagine and to actually do stand up for other women. And it makes you able to hear the call, to hear the bonobo call and to respond immediately instead of questioning things and trying to downplay what's really going on, but really stepping up without asking for permission, just stepping up and helping other women. And that's the key to forming the Bonobo Sisterhood. And then once we have the Bonobo Sisterhood, we can invite men because certainly men are our allies. And patriarchy hurts men too in huge ways. And I think that there are a lot of quiet, undeclared men who are potentially our allies. And if we build this and call it in and call men in, I think that we will have a very successful revolution. And then we can change the law. Okay. Bonobos have evolutionarily eliminated male sexual coercion. They're peaceful, they're playful, they have a lot of sex, they're just great. No lethal violence. They did this all without law and without a constitution. Just saying. So we as humans with supposedly, higher abilities at language and articulation, haven't figured this out yet. So you're actually on the cutting edge here. We're going to figure this out. Okay, next slide. That was a long slide. All right, this is your moment of hilarity. I saw this ad a few years ago, and it really first made me laugh, and then I took it more seriously. This is an ad, I hope you can all see it, for a blow-up doll called Safety Man. Oh, thank you so much. Don't travel without Safety Man as your bodyguard. Designed as a visual deterrent, Safety Man is a life-size simulated male that appears to be 180 pounds and 6 feet tall to give others the impression that you're protected by a male guardian while at home, alone, or driving in your car. This unique security device looks incredibly real with a positionable latex head and hands, airbrush facial highlights, and salt and pepper hair. Made of the highest quality inflatable PVC vinyl, he weighs just 7 pounds and can be dressed according to your own personal style. When not keeping vigil over your well-being, deflate, store, and transport him inconspicuously in the optional tote bag. Comes with repair patch. Okay, so this is pretty funny. And at the side, you see a woman, a white woman driving with this white safety man in the car, and he's definitely keeping her safe. And then she's deflating and storing him, in a bag. Okay, so first I see this and I'm laughing, and I think, like, this is what we need men for, and you think of the analogy to blow up female dolls, which men use for sex, and we need men for protection. And then I was like, wait a second, this is actually really serious. Like, why do we need men for protection? Protection against what? So we could take a question here, but I'm not going to interrupt in case people are still feeling shy. But the answer is we need protection from men from violence by other men. So this is chapter 3, which I call the fallacy of the male protection racket. And the fallacy of the male protection racket is that if men are protecting us and men are attacking us, we have nothing to say in between. We're completely vulnerable to men's decision as to whether or not they're in the mood to protect us. And I don't mean this sarcastically at all. I mean this goes into law enforcement too. In the US, 40% of law enforcement are batterers. And this is a constant, consistent statistic through the years. So when you call law enforcement for defense against your abusive partner at home and law enforcement doesn't respond effectively, you're in more danger than you were if you hadn't called the police in the first place. And we're barking up the wrong tree, if you will, to think that law enforcement will come to our aid, to think that men who represent law enforcement will come to our aid. And that's a big and very important realization. And it's also a fairly big thing for me to say because I've been involved in law enforcement in different parts of government. And this is the flaw. This is the fallacy of the male protection racket. And it means that if men have this power, then they get to decide, like I said, who among us is worth protecting. I have to move so that the sun isn't like highlighting part of my face and not the other part. I also like this screen in the background. There's actually a background here and it's not this like pink screen, but okay. All right, we need another deep breath. This is kind of a lot of information. Next slide. This is the cover of the New Yorker from March of 2022. And this says everything about patriarchy and patriarchal violence to me. So you see that it's all black and white in these sepia tones, and the only color is the bombing of the building in the background. And there's a male soldier who's doing the fighting, and the woman is trying to huddle over her children to protect them. This is patriarchy. War is patriarchy. War is territorial. War is murderous. Bonobos are peaceful. Bonobos protect each other. Bonobos protect one another's offspring to the point that an infant bonobo socially outranks an adult male bonobo. If an adult male bonobo comes across an infant with good food, he doesn't go near that infant. That infant can take food, or that little infant or little person, not person, little bonobo can take food out of an adult male's mouth, and the adult male will not do anything. Patriarchy creates this agreement between men that no matter where the men are in the scale, whether you're a president or a soldier at the bottom, and so the soldier isn't actually at the bottom because we give soldiers a fair amount of social currency, but the agreement is that they are all above women, and men buy into patriarchy so that they can enjoy the privilege of thinking that they are superior and supreme over women. And then there's an agreement between and among men not to interfere, like I was saying about law enforcement, but a man will not interfere in another man's possession of his women. So think about this, and this is not for the young teenagers because they don't go to bars yet. If you're in a bar and some guy is like, I want to buy you a drink, I want to, and you say, I'm really not interested, he's going to keep harassing you. If you say, I have a boyfriend, I'm engaged, or I'm married, he leaves you alone. I mean, there are women who wear wedding rings to bars so that people won't bother them. And why is that? Because there's this unspoken agreement of possession, and that possession is okay. But something about men in patriarchy and patriarchal violence that's also really important is that men suffer quite badly in patriarchy as well, because they are put into these boxes where they're not allowed to show any emotion, and they're not allowed to challenge the patriarchy, because if they do, then they will be regarded as gay. And if you're gay, then you are subject to even more abuse than if you just stayed quiet. So it's very hard to challenge the patriarchy for men. Um, and it's more difficult than you would think. It's surprisingly hard for men to challenge patriarchy, but it can be done, but we have to do it first. And it's not by smashing the patriarchy or dismantling the patriarchy. It's instead the idea of building a sisterhood and seeing what happens when we do that. Okay, next slide. I want you to not fall into what I call the good girl trap of patriarchal democracy. In the United States, we have a quote unquote democracy, and I don't think you can live in a patriarchal democracy. I think that that is a contradiction in terms. It's either a democracy or a patriarchy. And if it's a patriarchy, it's not a democracy. And just because we have the right to vote, which was the most significant legal gain that women have achieved, it doesn't mean that we don't live in a patriarchy. We live in a patriarchy where benefits are distributed in such a way that many women still support the patriarchy because that's all they know. And I know that there is actually a different way. So just really quickly, I'm going to tell you what the good girl trap of patriarchal democracy is and how it wastes our time, if you will. Okay, next slide. I see the good girl trap of patriarchal democracy as an infinity loop. So imagine that this is a board game. Okay, and we start with, next, you start with an injury. So something horrible has happened. A man killed a woman that he was intimately involved with, right? So this is the injury that we hear about all the time, and I want to make a point for you to think about. When you read an article that says woman killed, husband sought, you are likely to just turn the page because, or go to the next article, because of course you think if a woman is killed, the first suspect is always the man with whom she was in a relationship. If you think about that for a second, shouldn't that be completely the opposite of what we think? Like, shouldn't the husband or boyfriend or person who has professed to care about this woman be the last suspect and not the first suspect? Yes, that's a rhetorical question. Um, of course, it shouldn't be that way. And the fact that it is that way and that we accept this instead of saying, no, this is crazy, means that something is very wrong, deeply wrong about the structure of our society and our relationships between genders. Okay, so there's an injury, and what I was thinking of is I've worked a lot on preventing domestic violence homicide. So I'm thinking of like injuries, like that's an injury. So somebody suffers that injury, and the first thing they say, that's fine, is okay, we'll go to the legislature. Because if we only had a law that would have protected that person in this situation, it wouldn't have happened. And we don't want this to happen to anyone else. So we're going to make a law. So now the group, the people, the family, the survivors go to the legislators, and the legislators will hold hearings and they will have a committee listen to different testimony. Okay. And then they'll call it for a vote and it will either pass or not. But if it passes, then usually it's challenged. And it's challenged. What I mean by that is that somebody brings a lawsuit saying, oh, this law, we don't need this law because it's too broad or it's too narrow or it's already on the books. And it's not that we hate women, we just don't need this law. So they challenge it. And then it will be either struck down or upheld but not enforced. And in chapter 4 of the book, which is about patriarchal violence and a good girl trap of patriarchal democracy, I talk about a little known case that was incredibly important for women's rights in the United States, where the Supreme Court struck down a part of the Violence Against Women Act that gave women a federal civil right to be free from gender motivated violence. And the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, said, oh, no, 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 that is way too big of a right to give to women, and they will abuse it, and they cannot be trusted. And they didn't say this out loud, but this is what the decision was saying, and you can read my analysis of it if you would like. It was horrible. It's just unbelievable that we had a federal civil right to be free from gender motivated violence, and the Supreme Court struck it down. Okay, so next. Now you're back to square one. So go back for a second, please. Thank you. um, you're back to square one, which is the good girl trap of patriarchal democracy. So what happens is, for example, when that case struck down, when the court struck down that right for women, nothing happened. There were no cars overturned, there were no riots, there were no protests in cities. People just quietly went back, but now they were exhausted because they spent all of their time and energy getting this bill passed. So now they were told, like, well, maybe you could try a different kind of bill and do it in the states and then see if you can get another federal bill. And this just keeps us in an infinite loop of being busy and wasting our are radical energy. There's radical energy in all of us that says, this is not fair. The way that women and girls are treated is not fair. We all have that energy. We've all had that experience. Now, what do we do with that energy? And I have an answer for that. And the answer is you be bonobo. For real. You stand up for one another and you protect your sisters. Okay, next slide. You take a self-defense, self-worth defending class, and we are starting to create these classes, which is very exciting. And basically, it's self-defense classes that are embedded in lessons and psychology and law and history where women and girls can like think about it before you take the self-defense class. So you're not only getting the self-defense skills, but you're learning about how important what goes on in your own head is. One really great thing and source of energy to draw upon right here is that so many women and girls will defend our friends and our sisters before we'll even defend ourselves. And we will think more highly of our friends and our sisters than we do of ourselves. And I wanna get into that energy and really think about it and talk about it and have people realize how important self-love is and how important it is for you to know that you have a self-worth defending. So think about if you have a friend who's in a not great relationship and you say to her, I don't think he treats you as well as you deserve to be treated. Or I don't think she treats you how you deserve to be treated, or they treat you how you deserve to be treated. Um, we're so conditioned to be like that without taking into account often, oh, how about me? How, do I deserve to be treated better instead of making excuses for somebody's bad and unacceptable behavior? And I want us to be whole in our energy. And I want us to know that we are worth defending and our sisters are worth defending. Okay. Okay, this is how to do it. And just for a side note, chapter 6 is a self-worth defending, and then the rest of the book is an uplift. So if you get the book and you're reading it and you're in the first 5 chapters and you're feeling bogged down or like, oh my God, patriarchy is overwhelming, just skip ahead to chapter 6 and read the rest of it because this is all changeable. Patriarchy is not inevitable. We are absolutely conditioned to think it is. It absolutely is not. We need to build the sisterhood. This is the book in like 5 words. This is the Bonobo principle. If you agree with this, you are part of the Bonobo Sisterhood. First part, 1, nobody has the right to harm my sister. And what I mean by this is no one has the right to pimp my sister. No one has the right to abuse my sister. No one has the right to disrespect my sister, etc., etc., etc. Part 2, you all agree with that? Are we seeing any nods? Part 2, everybody's my sister. And it seems to me that this is the principle upon which bonobos act. Like they see something and they go, oh no, nobody has the right to do that to my sister. She's my sister. So that's the bonobo principle. And that's what I want you to keep in your mind right here at the forefront of your mind. Think about women and girls in your life and in your world differently. And you can come to one another's aid in unprecedented ways. And you should all tell me the ways that you're coming for one another as we build the sisterhood, because stories and examples can be part of the sisterhood and we can share them among each other and then inspire new ones because women and girls are amazing. Okay, next. I am not free while any woman is unfree. What I mean by this is that what women and girls have in common is much more significant than what divides us. And what we have in common is that we are all unfree and that we are not bonobos. We all live in a patriarchy wherever we live. Everybody who's on this call from wherever you are in the world, you live in a patriarchy and you are not free because of that. Go ahead. So I propose that how women, instead of thinking about how women stack up against men as our idea of equality, we instead think about what if we ask all women are created equal? So the Constitution in the United States says it starts with all men are created equal. And women for years have been saying, well, okay, if men make, a dollar, why are women only making 76 cents on the dollar and women of color make even less than 76 cents on the dollar? Um, and we hold up men as the standard of what we want. And I think that's an illegitimate standard. And I think that it leads to perpetuation of the patriarchy in a way. So instead, I want to do this experiment and say, all women are created equal. Now, certainly, we might be created equal, but we are positioned differently in society, and we all have different privileges. Next slide. And what I really, really, really want to see is that we share our resources among one another. That we think about, well, let's see, I'm white, I'm privileged, I have an education, et cetera, et cetera. I know that the person in the next town does not have these privileges, does not have access to law enforcement, or does not have access to money or food for her kids. So I'm going to figure out a way to share that so that I'm animated by this idea of equality among women. And I think what we can come up with is going to be very different and very powerful. And this can be the basis of our new understanding of a bonobo sisterhood. We can write a new constitution, certainly. I mean, men did it. Like, why can't we think about what we want and what we demand for our own thriving in this life? Also, equality among women is a way to heal patriarchal divisions among ourselves and to reject them and to say, I don't care if she's a different religion. I don't care if she's a different race. I don't care if she's a different class, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She's my sister. Everybody's my sister. And that's what's going to create the sisterhood and naturally watch patriarchy fall. Okay, next. Sharing food. In the United States, we have enough food to feed everyone twice over every single day. We waste an enormous amount of food every single day. And I think if women were in charge, we could really figure out how not to waste food and how to feed everyone. Bonobos, here's some more things about bonobos. Go ahead. Next. Next, next. Next. Okay. Food is a resource. Protection is a resource. Thinking about what we have that's our own resource is really, really important. Protection is a resource in that we can protect one another, whether it's physically or showing up for one another on, in social media or on the internet. Bonobos in real life, bonobos share their food. Chimpanzees fight over food to the point that it's unethical to conduct chimpanzee experiments about food sharing because they fight over it, and it could get into a very violent conflict. Bonobos share food, they give food to strangers before they even give themselves food, which reminds me of my grandma Sarah. She would always make sure that like everybody else ate. Everything about bonobos gives me hope. All right, here's my favorite word, xenophilic. It means love of strangers. Bonobos are xenophilic. Chimpanzees are xenophobic. If a chimpanzee group encounters another chimpanzee group, they have a territorial fight, a fight over territory. Does that sound like war to you? It sounds like war to me. And sometimes that will evolve into or devolve into lethal violence. When bonobos meet another troop, they laugh, they share food immediately, they have sex. Sometimes one will stay with the new troop instead of going off with the old troop. It's just a whole different way of being. They're peaceful. We could not need peace in this world more than we do right now. And we have the means to do it. And this is it. This is our secret to getting out of patriarchal violence. Okay. So we need to be bonobo and we need to share our resources, even if we just do it individually while we're building our sisterhood. Bonobosisterhood.org is the Bonobo Sisterhood Alliance, where courage meets collective action. What's different about the Bonobo Sisterhood Alliance and the Bonobo Sisterhood in general is the idea of collective self-defense. That it's not just that we learn individual self-defense, we learn that, but we learn that in the vision, within the vision of creating a collective self-defense for ourselves and our sisters. Thank you so much for listening. Okay.
Wow. Um, I do have the first question, and I think I should take the honor for being part of the organization. And the only like the first thing, and I think that the ticking thing that was behind my mind was, how did you come into the bonobos?
Oh, thank you for asking that. And how are we doing on time?
I
Oh, we're
think
doing okay. Great. Sometimes I get really carried away and I just talk, but I really try to concentrate on not going off on too many tangents. That is a great question. Thank you for asking. Um, in a few years ago, I was moderating a panel at Harvard, and Richard Wrangham was on the panel, and he's an anthropologist who was chair of the department at Harvard and wrote a book called Demonic Males. And I had the book Demonic Males, but I thought that the title was quite inflammatory. And I don't think that males are demons, you know? And I actually like some of my bonobo sisterhood moments in my life have been when my brothers came to my aid. So it's anyway, long story short, um, he talked about and talked about in the book how chimpanzee males batter their female reproductive partners in exact level of how fertile they are. So the more fertile they are, if they're in estrus, they will get more harassed because the males want to mate with them. Silverback gorillas will commit infanticide, abduct the female, and introduce her into their own harem and then impregnate her so that they now are the father of the offspring. This is like very, very common. Um, and orangutans commit what looks like rape because it's forced copulations where the female is kicking and screaming.
Mhm.
Bonobos, as I said, have no sexual coercion because they have eliminated it through their alliances. And when I found this out, my mind went, so I wanted to really study bonobos. And instead of just applying bonobo behavior as a model to human girls and women, I studied bonobos with Richard Wrangham, who's like a world expert on this. And we developed and co-taught a class together on theories of sexual coercion for 3 years. So now I work with his successor, Professor Martin Serbeck, who's unbelievable on working with bonobos, and he's lived with bonobos. He's working on reproductive autonomy in bonobos. And recently, there was a study that showed that bonobos have complex language, more complex than chimpanzees, and that they have at least like 700 terms that they communicate among each other.
This
Everything
is
about bonobos gives me hope. And this was not a facile application of bonobos to humans. This is like a real thing. everything about bonobos gives me hope.
I think everyone should know about bonobos.
I do too.
Wow. Um, okay. We might go to the questions, and for everyone who does have more questions, we can go on. The first question, it is recorded and it will be on our channel and also on our hub. What the name of the book? I'm also gonna share the screen here. The Bonobo Sisterhood.
Revolution through Female Alliance.
We do have a Make February Girls Human Rights Month campaign in this February, and I think we can have it online as well. To have a book reading would be
Oh, great,
it would be amazing. So I'm gonna put that immediately there.
great.
I'm gonna put also on our Mighty Network the link where you can get the book and also the Spotify option that
Great,
Professor Dan
great.
mentioned. Um, Okay, I also share the book again. Margot Hill. I'm interested that you think building a sisterhood is better than smashing the patriarchy. Surely simply building a communal defense against the patriarchy rather than tackling root causes not only excuses for male misogyny, but also doesn't address the issue that men face as a consequence of the patriarchy. Why? Why do you think that building a sisterhood is better?
Because we've been fighting in a system that is structured to make us lose. They made all of the rules within patriarchy, and it's a structural thing, like all the way down. And I see patriarchy as an architecture that is formed, created, and built through male-male alliances. And I see male sexual violence as the scaffolding of that architecture and that structure. This is a way to just get out of that structure altogether instead of fighting the patriarchy in the ways that good girls are taught to fight the patriarchy, as I was showing you in the infinity loop. And we have the choice to just get out of that loop, get out of that structure altogether, and create a different way of being instead of like knocking our heads against this wall. And the way to do it is to fight for ourselves and our sisters, and not just fight, but like stand up. Unified females against an isolated male will win.
Um, and I do think if I can add to that, men or society does expect that women fight with the same methods that
Mhm.
men have done towards women for decades, centuries, or whatsoever. But it goes way beyond our nature. So
Right.
it's very difficult for us to behave that badly or as you said, also in terms of statistics, to commit the same level of atrocity as men. So I think this is more in vibe with our nature.
Yeah. So let me address that for a minute. We think it's our nature, and it's possible that the difference between chimpanzees and bonobos show us that it's not just nature.
Mhm.
It's behavior. And men don't expect don't expect women to fight back. And they certainly don't expect women to fight back, like women to come to one another's aid. They perpetuate divisions among women, and they reward women for dividing against their sisters. And when we eliminate that, amazing things are going to happen. Does that make sense? And I do think, with all that said, that women are um, less violent, and that women would not create war. We would not have even created jails, I don't think. Like little rooms where we put people away for the rest of their life for committing a crime. Like, I just don't think women would do that. I think women will do better.
Very good point. Grace says, what advice would you give to young women in the global south who are trying to break out of the good girl trap in communities where speaking out is still seen as taboo?
Is still
Seen as
seen
taboo. Seen as like,
taboo, seen as taboo. Um, I think women in the global south have a harder time fighting patriarchy because patriarchy is so deeply ingrained. Um, but I also, in um, doing some work in the global south and having different students from different countries in the global south and having visited India twice, um, know that there's incredible feminist fighting spirit there. So, so just continuing that spirit and building on it, I think will help. And I think also um, a colleague of mine, Ruchira Gupta, is an amazing bonobo. And she created Apna Aap, and it's an organization in India to help women and their children get out of being trafficked or prostituted. And she has a brand new book out. The launch is actually tomorrow, but I would love to give it a shout out. Shout out! Here's my shout out. It's called The Freedom Seeker by Ruchira Gupta, and it will be fantastic. And she, as one person, as one bonobo, has created an amazing sisterhood um, where women stand together. Oh, fantastic! How did you do that so fast? That's the new book. Um, and she's helped countless women and even like worked with police, but not like one or two women going to police, but like a whole group of women. And police respond differently to a whole group of women than they do when they think it's just one or two or three women. So big groups of women know you can do it, know that you have this one life, this one precious life, and you have to stand up for yourselves and one another. It will work. Buy the book.
I'm gonna share the whole links on the Mighty Network, everyone.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Grace, for the question.
Yes, thank you. These are great questions.
Thank you. We have a question. How does sharing resources work with intangible resources? I'm thinking of feminist theories of the distributive paradigm where things like the ability to share privileges, like white privileges, can easily be shared. How would you suggest going about this?
Another great question. I think that this is going to be book number two. Um, in the United States, in a capitalist patriarchy, what women do is not given value. So again, it's a question of men deciding what's valuable, and they decide that what's valuable is what they do, and what women do is not nearly as valuable. And even if women are doing the same thing that the men are doing, it's not as valuable. This is all the idea of currency. So if you take a step back for a minute and you think about cryptocurrency, cryptocurrency was created, in the last decade by Wall Street bros. And now it's like legitimate, even though I think that it hides a lot of bad activity on the dark web. Um, but it's legitimate. Cryptocurrency just came out of nowhere. Okay, so hold that thought for a minute and then hold this thought. In 2015, Trump Jr. was interviewed on a radio show, and he said that if women can't take, jokes or harassment in the boardroom, they should go back to teaching kindergarten. And I was so struck by that because the boardroom is a place where decisions are made about money, about big money, right? So that like people who have enough money to, feed an entire town of, every day of sustainable, food supply so that there's not hunger, right? A kindergarten teacher, I remember my kindergarten teacher and my first grade teacher, like, that's a really, really valuable skill and a really valuable position for society. Like to shape the minds of kids and to help kids and to teach kids like basic human skills and values is more important, is much more important than what goes on in boardrooms. So what if women designed our own currency and we valued our own resources among one another? And we didn't wait for or depend upon men's valuation of what we do, but we created the bonobo currency. So that is the working title of my next book is let's do that. And let's really share among one another. And it's, it's not going to be easy or immediate, I don't think, but I think it can really be, and I think it can really, really be done and be done quickly. You put women in a room, let them come up with it, and we'll do it. So I don't have all the answers like all laid out at this point. I know that there's incredible energy when women unite around the idea of Bonobo Sisterhood and when women unite all together. So there are Bonobo Sisterhoods all over the world every day. If each of you thinks about a Bonobo Sisterhood in your own life, sometime when women came to your aid, that's what it is. And the Bonobo Sisterhood is a name and a concept for it as an umbrella so that we can organize and that we can start to share sources among one another.
Wow, so many good good thoughts. I have a question by Safi. Safia is our co-founder. Um, then a bit about organization. It was founded by Sultana Tafadar. She's a King's Counselor barrister in the UK, and her daughter is just she was 11 when the idea came out about the Gross Human Rights Hub. And I do think, listening to your talk, I do think it's some sort of Bonobo sisterhood of some sort. Yes, Safi, I will give you the floor.
Hi, um, I'm Safi, and first
Yeah,
of all, yeah,
thank you
thank
for
you.
creating this amazing organization.
Well, thank you so much for like presenting this slideshow and giving this talk. I think it was very informative, and I really enjoyed listening to it. So my question is, you've talked all about like the bonobos and how they look after women and each other, but given the patriarchy's written all the laws and whatnot, how do we rewrite them so then they become compatible with stuff that the bonobos do?
I think that so I know that this is going to be posted, so I should probably be slightly careful about how I word this. There are no laws that prevent us from creating a bonobo sisterhood. And we have to do women's leadership to me means doing what needs to be done without asking for permission to do it. We need to know that we have a right to defend ourselves and our sisters. So that can be the animating principle of the Bonobo Sisterhood, that we just take that's our human right. And this is the Girls' Human Rights Hub. So what better place to birth that right than right here, right now, is that you have a human right to self-defend and to defend your sisters. Nobody has to give you that right. Patriarchy isn't going to wake up one day and say, "Oh, I think that men have just too many rights and we should just give some away." We have to get out of the mindset of only being allowed to do what men in a patriarchy decide to allow us to do and really stand up for ourselves and our sisters. Then we can make new laws after we're, you know,
All in the same room together.
yeah, yeah.
Very good point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thea. Thanks so much for your work. And say hi to your daughter.
Thank you. Thank you, Safi. We have another question from Grace. How do we handle situations where women themselves enforce the good girl trap, like older women in silencing younger ones?
That is such an important question because so many women think that buying into the patriarchy and acting within the patriarchy is the way that they will succeed, quote unquote, in the world. I think we have to do two things. The first is find like-minded allies to build the sisterhood. And as we do that, be really careful to invite women in, even if they're reticent or even, really discouraging at first. And also to come to other women's aid, even if those women aren't like us or might be very, very patriarchal, that they might also, there's a very good chance that they would need us to come to their aid. If we hear a bonobo call, we answer it. So it really just goes back to being bonobo. But I think that instead of trying to fight with women and convince them that they'll be better off outside of a patriarchy, we have to show them by building the sisterhood and then inviting them in, or at the same time, simultaneously inviting them in, because it's really for everyone.
And Grace, I'm from Albania, and I think for all my journey in activism and on gender equality, I do have found that older women, they have patriarchy ingrained in their social values, beliefs, and everything. So it's very difficult, and I do have had moments with my with women silencing me more than with men, and it's a very um weird experience that I've had. But I do think I've learned to not fight back, but just to accept that as you said, we show them, and then later on they will understand. I do think with the years that have passed, they do understand more. So but if you put up a fight and you tell them, hey, this is happening, this is patriarchy, this is bad, this is wrong, they become defensive of what they were raised. So I do have found that showing is better than telling people. But Grace, thank you for a question.
I would add to that. I think that's a really good point. I would add that also treating them as friends and asking older women to be your mentor is really important. And I have this, I'm in my study right now, and I have this picture of, that's my mentor. Her name is Jane Dorenzo Piggott, and she was the partner at a law firm where I worked for a short time. And she has been for like 30 years the most amazing mentor that you could ask for, and has taught me so much about mentoring and always, always reaching a hand back to bring other people along. And I think that mentorship among women is a good way um, to include women who have climbed a ladder in patriarchy where they view other women as competition. And here's the thing. Bonobos treat everything with an idea of abundance. Sharing is because we have enough food, we can share. And chimpanzees act on the basis of scarcity. We don't want to be chimpanzees. We are bonobos. We have enough. We can share. We absolutely can share. So we need to tap into and stay loyal to our bonobo energy.
Um, Diwakar says, is sisterhood suffice to mitigate long-standing patriarchal structure? So is it enough?
Is
Is
sisterhood enough?
Yeah, to mitigate long-standing patriarchal
Hmm. I think I think with the inherent self-worth defending and the actual self-defense. So the other thing that this is calling for that's new and that is not in other like revolutionary theory is the idea of what I call a pre-sponse, which is a preventative response. And I'm not saying that we like go out and fight with men or that we, form groups and do something aggressive. I'm saying that we realize that we have a human right to exist in safety and liberty, and that we learn how to defend and enact that in our own lives and in the lives of our sisters in an unprecedented collective self-defense. So I think that that's the key.
Okay, the time is running. We have 10 more minutes. Love this session. I have a question. How did you feel navigating a patriarchal workplace like Harvard, and how did you set boundaries with male colleagues? I have a, is is it today in 2025 still a patriarchal place like the big universities? Not just from the professor side, but also from the student side. And then how does it feel navigating then? Because given, I think from your years, probably you have seen it, especially in the beginning.
Yeah, I would say so I don't mean to deflect, but I want to talk about Harvard on like the bigger screen of how important it is who leads an institution. Because when I got there, when I first studied for my LLM at Harvard, there was a white male dean, and he was pretty conservative, and there wasn't a lot of like student energy in a way. And in 2004, Elena Kagan was appointed as dean, and that was this like amazing surprise. And now Elena Kagan, as most of you know, is on the Supreme Court of the United States. And when she was appointed, it was like the sun came up. And she did things like put tampons and Kotex in the women's bathrooms. And now we have some bathrooms that are all gender bathrooms, but they still have, you know, supplies. And that's like a small thing, but a huge thing. So that just made things really different. Another thing that she did was create spaces for students to get together and talk. And it turns out if you create these spaces, people come and talk. And everything that she did was like created community in ways I wouldn't have thought would appear at Harvard Law School. So it's not an institution really depends a lot on the people who are running it. Um, and the same for government. Like government can be either really helpful to people or not.
Very true. Maria says, thank you for this inspiring and different perspective. It does give hope. I'm going to Fletcher next semester registering at
Great.
Harvard. I would love to send you a message and see if I could be involved with the Alliance and your work during my time there. I also want to ask, how can we do this when there are still some women that live under patriarchy and do not realize it? In turn, not participating in this Bonobo Alliance.
Great. Um, well, the Bonobo Alliance is available and will be available, on the internet, so anybody can access it. But of course, people will have different ability to enact it and to access resources. Um, so we want to be in a position where we can really help spread the word as much as possible. Maria, welcome to Fletcher. I had a student once from Fletcher who was cross-registered for my gender violence law and social justice class. at the law school, and her name is Anisha Gopi. And Anisha, after the class, decided to stay in Cambridge and work with me for a year. She's a lawyer from Bangalore, and now Bengaluru, rather, sorry, um, and now lives in between Germany and India. Um, but she's a human rights, women's rights lawyer, and she just worked with me for a year about all of this. And Fletcher's just a great school, and you should be in touch with Anisha. She can be your mentor as you go through Fletcher. But congratulations. And oh, so for everyone, my email is rosenfeld@law.harvard.edu. Email me anytime and be patient. I will
Of
get back to you.
course, of course. But thank you so much. It's completely understandable. We have a lot of questions. I
Okay, I'll
don't
try to
know.
answer quickly.
Yes. And okay. I don't want to leave anything, but if you see something, so Ruth says, in a lot of religion, there's a huge advocacy and promotion for sisterhood. How do you think religion could be used to promote sisterhood among women? It's a big question.
It's a big question. I I think that religion is so patriarchal. Um, and I am actually Jewish. And I think that in Judaism, you can find text to support so many different types of behavior. And you could certainly find support for creating sisterhood. Um, I think that I would, for sure, you can look to religion um, for bonding purposes among women and girls within your religion. But I would really encourage you, each of you, to be very mindful of how religion separates women against each other, and to say that's an illegitimate separation. She's a woman. I don't care what religion she is. If she's in trouble, I'm going to come to her aid. And I think that religion and culture are so often used to silence women from coming forward because of the value that a traditional family is given under various religions, and that operates to isolate us from creating a sisterhood or from coming forward to get help. So I worry about that. So don't let it divide you. Let it unite you, but not divide you. And then look to interfaith coalitions. Build interfaith coalitions and sisterhoods.
There is what methods can we use to encourage more women to join the sisterhood when there are instances of women almost feeding in traditional patriarchal culture? So what methods do you recommend?
Um, I think finding shared concerns and shared values, and women, I don't know if it's because we've been trained to culturally always like be associated with children, but that's one way to help women, is to protect their children. And protection, I said this in the presentation, but I will say it again, protection is a resource. And we really have to stop depending on men to protect us. We have to protect one another and protect our children, because what we are protecting them from is men, and they're not protecting us.
Um, I don't know which one to choose, but thank you so much for the eye-opening talk. You talked briefly about patriarchal violence in the context of war. How would you say the Bonobo framework would be implemented, if at all, in the context of state security and diplomatic strategy?
Um, I think again, it's really important to realize that bonobos achieved all of this without like a country, without borders that they defend. Whereas chimpanzees, as I said before, defend their territories. I think that territories and states are part of a male imagination about like what's mine and keeping people out and amassing resources and keeping them for ourselves. Whereas bonobos, I think, wouldn't have these kinds of artificial borders. Like, what do borders even mean? Um, so I think it's important to think beyond borders. I think we want to think about bonobos without borders, you know? And I think really importantly, and thank you for the question, we want to think about peace. And peace is possible. It doesn't feel possible, but it really is possible. And peace has to do with diplomatic relationships and sharing among borders instead of using borders as a way to punish people and allocate privilege in a patriarchal world.
I would say that maybe if all women were in the, those war committees, definitely maybe there would not be wars, or at least there would be. And I've heard that the best negotiators, peace negotiators, are women. Like,
Right, right. In law, there have been studies in the US that women are better negotiators in the field of law too. Um,
um, we're running out of time, and we do have a couple of more questions, Diane. But like, would you like to go and choose one of or a couple last ones?
no, you can choose.
Okay. I hear one could be a bit interesting, considering the good girl trap and how the patriarchy conditions women to prioritize likability and compliance over self-protection. I would love to know your perspective on the public and legal fallout from the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. Do you see this case as a reflection of how deeply entrenched these expectations still are, especially for survivors who may not fit the mold of the perfect victim? And I think that case is the perfect example that women were a lot against Amber Heard, and on the whole way that the case turned out, you could see the comments like it was a lot of like not waiting even for the facts. So even before the facts or everything, there were a lot of like I would say comments from women, especially on the case.
Right. Um, okay, this is a great question to end on. Um, I think that that case was a strong example of how women are taught to divide against one another in a patriarchy. So I want all of you to think about women's magazines for a minute. And if you've seen, and I appreciate that there are women from all over, and maybe this, is not as strong a theme outside of the US. Um, some women's magazines run like a feature that says who wore it better. And it will have like two women who had been wearing similar dresses or the same dress at some fancy event. And then women vote on who looks better in the dress. And I think this is exactly wrong. Like this is exactly what we don't want to be doing is judging other women based on their appearance. And that's what we do. So the whole other key to the Bonobo Sisterhood is starting in between your ears, starting in your own mind, and saying, instead of judging another woman as soon as you see her, saying, instead of saying, oh my God, she's a skank or she's a slut or why would she dress like that or like those heels are too high or accept all the stuff that we're taught as is a basis to judge other women and separate ourselves so that we think if we're just good girls, nothing will happen to us and just catch ourselves. And instead of doing that, say, that may not be my fashion choice. She can wear whatever she wants, and she has the right to wear whatever she wants and to be safe. Nobody has the right to harm her. She's my sister. And that is so different from what the patriarchy teaches us. So Amber Heard, I was a signatory to a letter supporting Amber Heard. There were lots of people who did come to her defense. Um, and I thought it was just sickening what happened in that case. Um, and then the last thing that I want to say, though, about compliance is really, really important. Chapter 5 is called Compliance Sex. And the theory of chapter 5 is that in a patriarchy, so much of sexual interaction is because women are responding to male sexual coercion instead of having an affirmative sense of their own sexuality and what they want. So bonobos give us the only example that I know of what female sexuality might look like outside of a patriarchy imbued with sexual coercion. So you can certainly get more information from chapter 5, but the idea even of the term of compliance sex is like that women comply with a lot of sex that they don't actually affirmatively want, and that we should live in a society where we want affirmatively things and we get them. And instead of having those imposed on us and then having our complaints or our injuries ignored in a system that privileges male sexual coercion over our human rights to be free from sexual violence and coercion.
And I think that would be a good moment to close this session. It's good that more information is out there on what does constitute going beyond, not so because abuse is only the highest thing. No, also not being compliant and going above your inner core, being good with your own terms, and having a man, a woman, or whoever question those does constitute violence against women. I want to thank you so much, Diane, for this amazing session, for opening our minds and whole horizons on the Bonobo Sisterhood, and just like questioning and having this sort of model introduced to us. I'm going to give a moment to our founder and executive director, Sultana Tafadar. She wants to say a few last words. Hi, Sultana.
Hi, Diane.
Hi,
Um,
Sultana.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm just really echoing what Ilvan has already said. I mean, this was just an amazing session. I really thoroughly enjoyed listening to this. As a lawyer myself, I often spend time, we spend time splitting hairs about the law says this and the law says that, and how we can try and extract some protection here and there. But actually, it was just so refreshing to step back from all of that and listen to it from a complete different perspective, and almost sort of first principles perspective, just going back to the beginning of how we actually should be and what our mindset should be like and how we should view things. And it was just incredibly fascinating, and I can't tell you how much I enjoyed listening to you, so thank you so much for that. And I'm
Thank you.
sure all the participants that we have will have absolutely enjoyed it, and this recording will go up on our website and also as a podcast, and so hopefully more and more people can benefit from this. So I just really wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time out, and we hope you'll be part of our sisterhood also. We are trying to create what you are speaking of at Girls Human Rights Hub, and so we really appreciate your thoughts and your time. Can I just ask one question? Actually, I was going through the list of questions that the participants had put up, and one I found really that just sort of leapt out at me, and one that I sort of read about and grapple with. How do we, we know the difficulties and the problems that the patriarchy pose, but also we have the matriarchy and matriarchal structures that sometimes are quite strong in terms of reinforcing the patriarchy. I remember many, many years ago reading about Rwanda. Well, it was a refugee camp, and there were reports of an incoming attack on the refugee camps. And the matriarchy, the women, actually went out and performed female genital mutilation. On quite a lot of the girls in the refugee camps. And there seems to be this sort of the matriarchy, which seemed to reinforce these structures. And how do we go about dismantling these matriarchal structures? How do we get them to join the sisterhood? Because sometimes they can be really entrenched in these positions, in these views. So a lot of the time you'll get women who say, no, we need to have female genital mutilation. We need to do X, Y, and Z. Yes, we need to, no, you don't have a right to say, no, no, you mustn't get an abortion. How do we fight the matriarchy in those circumstances? And I'll end there. Thank you so, so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for your work and your comments. And absolutely, I am now part of the Girls Human Rights Hub. Consider me in. I'm all in.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great question. FGM is an extreme form of patriarchal violence, and it is inflicted by women, but I think it's women still in a patriarchy, that it's a way to promote, it's a harmful cultural practice to promote marriage and marriageability, and marriage to the shock of most people who are like conditioned to think that it's the greatest thing ever, is not actually a great thing for women and girls. And I've done work in some African countries on stopping FGM, and what has been successful is what V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, has done outside of Nairobi in Nurok. She built a safe house, and it's a very successful safe house where girls can go to escape FGM when they find out, like, their heads are shaved, and then they find out that it's going to happen to them, and they can escape to this shelter. And law enforcement, like the local police, are also involved, and then they try to do reconciliation with the family. And they've just done a lot of cultural on the ground work with that was led by Agnes Pareyu, who's a Maasai leader. And she would go from village to village talking to women and girls and talking to the men, and getting them, like, person by person, town by town, invested in stopping this practice. So yes, women can commit rather patriarchal violence, but when you get down to it, it's all about upholding the male's sexual right to be supreme and control women and girls and their sexuality and reproductive abilities and choices. I'm happy to share work with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Diane. That's super, super helpful. Really appreciate it. And again, thank you. Once you're in the sisterhood of Girls Human Rights Hub, you can't leave. So we're taking you. we've taken you on board, of course, with your permission. Thank you so
Fantastic.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Diane. I hope it was a good start of a morning for you and with the questions and the girls. I'm sorry for everyone who didn't have the question answered. Please do write to Professor Diane, and for anything more, we're definitely gonna do that book reading on February, and
That'd be great.
I think that there will be a lot of follow-up questions related to the Bonobo Sisterhood. I'm very
Thank
thankful.
you, Ilvana. You did a really nice job. Thank you so much for moderating and making this all run very smoothly. And thank you to Sophie, my new intern, who helped me with my slides.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone, and hope you have a very lovely rest of the day.
Be Bonobo!
We will. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.